Hey everyone, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am Aaron Freeman, founder of FalcFans.com. I'm joined by Scott Carassa, who is of ProFootballSpot.com. And this week we are back to talk about the Atlanta Falcons and their win over the Houston Texans, preview their Week 5 game against the Washington Redskins. We'll talk a little bit about the roster moves they made earlier today. We'll talk a little bit about all this talk about Roddy White as well. And we will, kick off the show by dogging Pro Football Focus. We usually start in the show with a Scott Karasik rant, but I think he wants to kick off things with a rant. But before we do, let me introduce our guest tonight. You may have just briefly seen him. His name is Tom Melton. If you are familiar with the Falcons Fans podcast, you may have recently heard him laughing on a recent episode. He's been on Falcon Central Radio Show in the past. I think it was like 2 years ago at the East-West Shrine game or something ridiculous like that. But we brought Tom on this week so we can chat about a lot of things, get updates on this week's action. Welcome back to the show, Tom.
How's it going, guys? Good to be back.
All right. Of course, we will also answer all you guys' mailbag questions at the end of the show, but let's kick things off. Scott, you got some things you want to get off your chest about Pro Football Focus grades?
I'm just so frustrated with the lack of context in their grades. They just decide to murk some people that you think the guy made a good play or played a good game, and you're just like, you know what? All right. And then you go in there and you're like, oh, minus 2.1. Oh, minus 9.7. Oh, minus 6. And you're like, Vic Beasley, minus 3. What? He was the only pass rush the Falcons had all day. Or William Moore, minus 4. Wait, what? He had a pick. He had a bunch of key hits. He didn't miss a tackle. Like, I don't understand. Because a lot of times they'll give you a 0 for a play because it's just doing your job, but they'll give you a -2 for a play that's also just doing your job. Best example of it, Aaron, you've been talking about this on Twitter, that Schofield play, where he got burned by Lance Dunbar for 17 yards on a 3rd and 23. Any coaching staff looks at that and goes, all right, you're probably, a minus, but it's not a bad minus. They normally give you a plus, a 0, or a minus, and they might give you 2 pluses, they might give you 2 minuses on a play, but they won't give you more than that. Most coaching staffs don't grade you like minus 2.0 for a single play unless you really, really screw up your assignment. Schofield didn't really screw up his assignment. He played his assignment. His guy caught the ball. His guy overmatched him and was just better than him in terms of speed and strength and size. Or not speed and strength, but not size. He was faster than him.
We know what you're saying.
More elusive. He gained 17 yards. And then, boom, he went down because Schofield hit him and did his job and didn't allow the first down. A coaching staff is going to give him a 0 on that play. Pro Football Focus is going to give him a -2 because he got beat for 17 yards on a route when he was a defensive end guarding a running back in a zone play. The context isn't there. That's my big issue with Pro Football Focus and some of their grades. There is no context. They gave Warlow a -9.1, where if you go back and watch the game, the 3 plays that I could see them giving them a -2 on, he got blocked in the back on 2 of them. On the 3rd, he got key blocked by Doug Free, which probably did deserve the -2. But you don't give him, when you get blocked in the back, you can't take a guy and go, oh shit, he got illegally blocked, it wasn't called. But it's still a -2 on him. That doesn't make sense to me. And then in pass coverage, they gave him a -3.9 because of 2 plays where he was dropping back in the zone. Dunbar caught the ball, and then he either just didn't get there in time to knock it away, or he missed a tackle. On a missed tackle, I don't mind seeing a -2. But on a guy who caught the ball who runs a 4.45, the same thing Aaron was talking about, it doesn't make sense to give a guy a -2 if he's playing his role. And then if he makes the tackle as quick as he can. I don't understand. So.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with Pro Football Focus is I think they're a great resource they, for the most part, I'd probably say 80% of the grades, based off my own tape study, I would probably be like, yeah, that's about where I think a guy is. But there's about 20% of the time I'm like, I don't know what that is. And you're right. It's a lot better context than you get by just simply looking at a box score and saying, oh, that guy had 11 tackles. That means he had a great game. You don't know if those tackles happened, 18 yards downfield or anything like that. But it's one of those things where you don't really like. You look at Schofield's coverage grade, and it's I think a lot of it has to do with their sort of normalization process, which I think he drops into coverage twice. He gets burned for 17 yards on one of those plays, and so he gets a lower coverage grade than somebody who may have dropped on. If he had dropped into coverage like 4 or 5 times, his grade would have been a little bit higher. But it's one of those things where you don't really get the context of what he did, and he gets this negative grade where at the end, is it not a great play? Absolutely. Should it have a negative score on it? Sure. But it's not really that big a deal, but it's going to wind up, at the end of the season, if he gives up another 17-yard play on a 3rd and 23 or something like that, he's going to have like a negative coverage grade, and people are going to sit there and think, oh, Schofield's not good in coverage. And it's like, yeah, he is actually probably better in coverage than you think, because he was able to, as a defensive end, at least, be within a step or two of Lance Dunbar, who's, I think as of last week was Pro Football Focus's highest graded running back in coverage. In the pass game as a receiver, and runs a sub 4.5 40. So, like, for me, I think if you put that play into context, I'm actually pretty impressed with what Schofield did. But he didn't make the play. But overall, I think he's actually probably better in coverage than his grade gets. And so it's one of those things where I remember a couple of years ago with that St. Louis Rams game that the Falcons won in 2013, where Sam Baker had this like -8 overall grade or something like that, because he was terrible against Robert Quinn. But I remember watching that game, and I thought Lamar Holmes was just equally as bad against Chris Long, but Lamar Holmes got a positive grade in that game. And it was just like, that was the first time I really started thinking, like, I don't really know what exactly is going on with their grading system, and it brings, I always bring a little healthy bit of skepticism, just because of that 20% of the time I don't really agree with what they're doing, but it is what it is.
Well, thankfully, the Falcons did change this game up, so we don't have to see a lot of coverage and a lot of guys like Schofield and stuff in coverage.
Yeah. All right, guys. I like that rant. Let's move on to some of today's moves. Today, the Falcons put Devin Hester on short-term IR. He will not be able to play for another 8 weeks. We won't see him until Week 13 against the Tampa Bay Bucks at the earliest. Boo-hoo for the Bucks, because he's going to be raring to go by then. Obviously, Hester's been dealing with turf toe injury. We sort of hoped that he would be back by Week 3 at the beginning of the season. Obviously, that's not going to be the case now. Obviously, the turf toe is a big deal. I think I said on this show in the past, when I was 22, I had turf toe, and it didn't really heal for me for 18 months. Obviously, Devin Hester has, back then I didn't have medical insurance, so I think Devin Hester is doing a little bit better in that regard. But it's an injury that lingers. I remember, a year after I thought it had gone away, I step off a curb and it automatically flares up again. It's one of those injuries that takes forever to heal, because you're standing up and it's like an inflammation of a tendon in your toe, and it's not fun. But hopefully this, having him on IR for 8 weeks, allows him the time to heal. The other moves that the Falcons made, they brought back Charles Godfrey and Tony Moyaki, or Tony Milwaukee, as he's more affectionately known. They cut Mickey Schuler, who they signed last week, and I think Scott and I both said, yeah, he's probably not going to last very long. I think he's probably a little shorter than we thought. I think we thought we might get at least 2 weeks before he would get cut, but he got about 7 days.
I mean, I thought about 3 weeks, because I was like, whenever Moyaki's healthy, that's when he's going to get cut.
So what are you guys' thoughts on all those roster moves the Falcons made, and Devin Hester and can the Falcons handle not having Devin Hester for the next eight weeks and stuff?
I'm not really worried about Devin Hester when you got Eric Weems on the roster. I realize Weems isn't the home run threat that Hester is, but he's a good, reliable returner. On kick returns, he's probably going to get you 22, 23 yards. On punt returns, he's going to get you your 11 to 12 yards. So he's not going to be that top 10 returner, but he is going to be a guy who you throw him out there and you're going to be happy with the results because you're going to have good field position regardless. So I think without Hester, they'll be fine. And Hester having turf toe, the only real way to fix turf toe is to rest. I mean, that's what everybody I've asked has told me. I talked with William Carroll of FanDuel. He's an injury expert. I talked with Dave Siebert. He used to be the medical guy over at Bleacher Report. He's now at Washington as an orthopedic doctor. So I trust their opinion. They both said that the best thing for him to do would be to rest, and he probably had a small setback, and that's why he got put on injured reserve. So I'm not as worried about there. I think Godfrey coming back is more just filling a roster spot for now. I think it's, hey, who else do we have on our short list or 5-man list that we can bring back, and he's that guy. If Antone Smith can be that guy next week, I would be ecstatic. I just don't want to see Charles Godfrey active or on the roster past like 2 more weeks because he's pretty terrible. And I think Teresi looked really good playing free safety, so I'd rather see him out there than Godfrey. At least if you got to put Allen on the bench for another week, do the MCL.
All right, Tom, weigh in here.
Well, I'm not worried about Hester being out. I think that we'll be fine without him. I mean, we haven't missed him too much lately, so I think that Scott's right that we've got Weems. We'll be fine. We'll miss the home run threat and maybe a little bit of a over-the-top presence outside of Julio, but he's not usually automatic on catching those passes anyway, so it's not that big of a deal to me. I've always liked Tony Milwaukee, but he's been injury-prone since college, so I think that at the tight end position, we're always just kind of looking for, will this guy be good? Will this guy be good? And no, he probably won't be that good. He's probably going to be pretty injury-prone. So we can get more into that because I have thoughts about that, about the draft, because I saw a couple draft questions in the mailbag. But glad he's back because I think he's good depth, but I don't think he's going to be a huge difference maker. I'd be happy if I was wrong, but I don't think he's going to be a huge difference maker. And I agree with Scott. Godfrey is probably just to make sure we have a warm body in case we need to throw something on the field. I think that hopefully he won't see a ton of playing time, but who knows with our secondary sometimes. So we'll see. I think that
if Parisi goes down, though, the best move they could do would just be to put Salvard back there instead of Ishmael or Godfrey.
Salvard.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you're not in an ideal situation with Ishmael, Southward, and Godfrey as your 3 options to play free safety. At that point, just put William Moore in 1 high and play like a 46. That's what I would do.
Well, that's why they're putting Robinson Teresi back there. Because he's a much better fit.
Yep.
I would have liked to see them re-sign Sean Baker instead of Charles Godfrey, even though, I guess I'm unofficially a Charles Godfrey guy. I jumped off that bandwagon as early as I possibly could. But I thought Sean Baker did some nice things this preseason and, did a decent job on special teams last year. So as a body, just to get to these next 2 games, that would have been probably my preference. But whatever, it is what it is. Okay, guys. So, do you think because of Toilolo's, less than stellar blocking, do you think there's a chance that Moyaki could take over the starting spot if Jacob Tammy continues to miss time?
Oh, easily.
I definitely think there's a shot. I mean, I'm not, as you're aware, I'm not a big Toilolo fan. I mean, everyone thought that because he was coming from Stanford and he was a tight end, he was going to be some fantastic mid-round addition. And I think that they stereotypically just assumed he could block because he played for Stanford, and he's having some issues with that. So I think if Moyaki could stay healthy and if he shows that he can block, I think he'll get on the field. But staying healthy has always been his problem. So as long as hopefully he can, because he can make some plays, but I don't know.
If Moyaki can be healthy, he looked so much like Algie Crumpler his rookie season.
Ooh, Algie Crumpler. Now that's a name I like. Want me to go get his jersey?
And then he got injured and it's been nothing since.
Yeah.
Toilolo has been exactly what I saw at Stanford.
Average.
A guy who could be a second tight end if you didn't really need anything crazy, and a guy who would be a good red zone target. But other than that, he had no real potential in the NFL. I gave him a 7th round grade because he had that one thing. There's always one thing you got to find for a guy to give him a 7th round grade, to where you're like, you know what, this guy has some potential in the NFL, and it was him being a red zone target. Sorry about that. I live by the Air Force Base. It was him being a red zone target that you were like, you know what, this guy can play in the NFL. This guy deserves a 7th round grade. But other than that, I didn't really see anything there. And he's sadly proved me right.
Yeah, I mean, like I'd probably say I'm probably a bigger Toilolo fan than probably your average Falcon fan, but he is a limited player. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's really just a third tight end that you want to put in situations like the red zone. You know, have him play some H back. You know, maybe if you're going to go jumbo, throw him out there on the edge or something like that. But you know, you don't want him playing like what he's played like 60 snaps the last 2 weeks. Like that's too much for him at this point. He needs to be more like a 15, 20 snap guy on offense at most.
Really. I agree with that. I agree with that.
In the red zone, run the old Brian Finneran fade with Toilolo.
Finneran fade.
He's 6'7", and he can jump higher than Finneran could.
But he can't catch like Finneran could. That's the problem.
No, but if that's his only job, go up there, catch the damn ball. He does better that way. For whatever reason, he does better when it's thrown high. I'm just going based off what I've seen on film the last 2 years. When he goes up high, the ball's thrown high, he comes down with it. When the ball's thrown at his chest or lower, it's a 50-50. You might not get a catch. But if he has to reach out and he has to catch it with his fingertips, for whatever reason, that works for him. And it's away, the ball's away from his body and he has to catch it like that, he catches it, no problem. So I don't know what to do, like what to tell you guys other than that's how you get him to catch the ball. If you're Matt Ryan, you just throw it a little bit tougher than you normally would, and he'll go get it.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, according to Wikipedia, Brian Finneran's hands are terrible. So,
hey, Madden said the same thing, and they were wrong.
Yeah.
It did take Finneran until about 2008 when he got a real quarterback to have good hands.
All right, guys. So let's, the big news today in Atlanta, at least on Falcons Twitter, was, some quotes that Roddy made to ESPN. He later clarified some of them. We would be remiss if we do not address this topic on tonight's show. So I guess, what are your guys' thoughts on what Roddy said, and should we strike up the pitchforks and the torches? And what are your thoughts on some of these trade rumors that people like Jason Lockham and others are starting to kick around?
Stupid. Roddy shouldn't be telling this to the media. He should be telling it to Matt Ryan, first of all. Like, hey, I know you're not looking at me. I watched the film. Throw me the damn ball. That's all. As long of a conversation as it really has to be. The trade rumors are even more asinine because we need Roddy. So there's no reason to trade him because we need him. So if
They're also not coming from anybody who's legit.
well, of course it's not because it's bullshit. Like, how could it be legit if it's just a bunch of made-up crap?
It's
So I
Jason
don't.
LaCanfora running with a speculation.
That's not the first time, nor will it be the last time that happens. So, big who cares for me. I mean, Roddy always talks. He always says something stupid at some point. Maybe we just got it out of the way early this year. Doesn't matter to me, even remotely.
Yeah.
Just get him the ball. I mean, it really can't hurt. I'd rather have him getting the ball than Toilolo or something. So, throw him the ball. That's really how you solve the problem. This is probably the easiest Roddy problem we've had in a long time. Like, he wore a free Mike Vick shirt once. That was a hard problem to solve. This one, we just have to throw him the football. Problem solved.
And the free Mike Vick shirt, it wasn't that big of a deal, if we're being honest.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of white people made it a big deal, but I'll leave that alone.
That's because white people are stupid.
Agreed. 100%.
Because we can say that because we're white.
I'll leave that one alone.
It's okay because we said it, Aaron.
Exactly.
I do like how people, when I was talking about the Falcons getting Mike Vick to be the quarterback, people were like, oh, it'll create a controversy if Mike Vick comes back to the Falcons because Roddy wore that T-shirt that one time. It's like, dude, he wrote a stupid comment on his shirt. Like, he's really going to be like, oh, Mike Vick's my quarterback. And,
wasn't that his, like,
years ago.
second or third year, too?
8 years ago.
He was in,
Roddy White wrote that on his shirt.
Roddy's not that smart
ago.
now. He was an even bigger idiot when he was that young. So
yeah. It's like whatever. But yeah, look, I think the rumors are dumb. I think there's zero chance the Falcons would trade him. I think if Dimitroff or Dan Quinn went into the office and said we should trade Roddy White, I think Arthur Blank would slap them in the face and said that's not happening. I don't think there's that would want Roddy White at this point. Like, why would you? You know, he's 33. You got to eat like $2 million in salary cap. You know, he's not. You know, if you go back and you watch the tape, it's not like he's creating a ton of separation. He's getting opening games, but it's like a couple of times a game, and the Falcons aren't throwing him the ball. So it's like, what team would, you know, give up a future draft pick, even like a 5th or 6th round pick for that? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. So,
well, and Roddy's been like slowly declining. I mean, we've all seen it. I mean, he's getting older. That's what wide receivers do, whether they run 4.4 flats or 4.5s. I mean, they eventually slow down. And
I like how you said slowly, even though we all know it's quickly.
You're going to hurt the trade value we can get for him, Scott. I mean,
we might be able to
get for made up the trade value. There is no trade value for Roddy White.
I want to trade him to the Lions for the number 1 overall pick.
I like that.
You know?
I don't think the Giants will happen. We'll trade him up to the Lions for Calvin Johnson. Or how about Seattle, because Seattle needs a wide receiver for Jimmy Graham. Because it's not like they use Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, I'll take Jimmy Graham. I would love to jam him in the Saints' face twice a year.
That sounded kind of dirty.
It was dirty.
Dirty things in the Saints.
I mean, it's the Saints. We got to play dirty.
You just stick Tyson Jackson on him, he'll be all right.
Hell yeah, man. Tyson Jackson do what he did to Cam Newton last year. I'm all for some dirty play against the Saints.
There you go.
I'm cool with that.
So you guys want to talk about the Texans game? I heard the Falcons blew out a team this week. So
I heard they were up 42-0 at some point.
Yeah.
That's decent. I mean, it's kind of sounded like a varsity and JV game since I didn't get to watch it. I was like, God, those poor JV kids, they probably feel terrible about themselves. I have to ask, since I predicted that Mallet would get completely rattled and suck, did they get pressure on him early and did he panic? Because I didn't get to see the game.
Basically.
They didn't get a lot of pressure on him. It's just he just sucked. It was basically that was it.
Well,
Count
he was
it.
getting the ball out on 3-step drops, and then Desmond Trufant was going, nope, not my house, and Alford was going, nope, you're a bitch. And that's basically what happened.
Wow,
Pretty
they
much.
were really saying those things while deflecting the passes. That's.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It
wish
wouldn't
they would have
shock
been
me if
mic'd.
they were.
I wish they were mic'd up for that.
I'm just saying, it would not shock me if they were saying those things because his passes were weak.
Yeah, that's kind of their problem. Now it's not good. I've been saying it since he was at Arkansas, and everyone got mad at me. What do you do?
He was a crackhead, though.
Hey, it was cocaine.
Okay. You get it right or pay the price.
Is that not the same thing?
No, one's for rich peppy kids and one's for okay.
Yeah, same thing in my head.
Okay.
Fair enough. Anyway, I didn't see the game, so I can't really throw that much in. So.
Okay. Scott, what are your thoughts on the game?
I mean, it was kind of shocking to see Julio just kind of chill on the side, like, hey, I'm going to distract everybody. And then Devontae Freeman was Devontae Freeman again. I'm so excited about Devontae Freeman moving forward. I think he's the perfect back for this scheme. I said it going into the season. I said it going into training camp. I said it going into the draft even. Like, Devontae Freeman is the guy that will be the one who carries the scheme this year. And I think it'll still be that way. And I think Tevin Coleman will get his 10 carries and his 2-3 catches at most a game. But I still think Freeman is the guy you want to be that main back.
Yeah. I was a little skeptical of my cousin Devontae going into the season. I remember back in March, people were talking about, oh, he could be a 250 carry running back, and I was like, come on, guys, he's not going to be a 250 carry running back. But based off the way he's played these last 2 weeks, it's like, yo, Aaron was wrong. That's weird. That doesn't happen very often. But I thought he would come back down to earth a little bit this week. I guess technically he did because he only had 130 combined yards as opposed to 160 or whatever he had last week against Dallas. So, he is mortal after all. But
Aaron, I'm just going to say, Devontae Freeman.
I have to ask you this, Scott. I think I seriously went back and watched clips from when he was at Florida State because a bunch of people were tweeting me and be like, oh, clearly you didn't watch him when he was at Florida State if you didn't think he looked like this. And I was like, I watched him a lot when he was at Florida State, and he did not look like this. He was a violent runner, yes. He was good, yes, but he was not this explosive in my opinion. So weigh in for me. Do you think he looked this explosive at Florida State? Because I don't think he did.
He was not this explosive at Florida State, which is why I gave him a second-round pick.
Boom! Suck it, Twitter people.
However, Kyle Shanahan has a way of taking a guy who's not super explosive and making them look more explosive than they are, but putting them in a lot of open space. Hey, let's create this giant rushing lane with the zone scheme. Hey, Devontae, just run through the giant hole. Oh, hey, look, everybody's going this way. Devontae, sneak out the back. Wide open. Boom. A guy with 4.5 speed is going to outrun a bunch of guys that are running 4.6. He's going to look ridiculously explosive, outrunning a bunch of guys that are 4.6, especially when he's got 50 yards straight to the end zone. And they're coming on the other side of the field. I mean, it's just math, physics, whatever you want to call it. So, Shanahan's a genius. He makes Devontae look better than he is. But Devontae is basically in the exact same scheme he was in college, which is another big reason why I was like, Devontae's going to explode this year, and people are going to go, where the hell did this kid come from?
Good call.
Yeah, there you go. It'd be great when Tevin Coleman comes back because now we'll have 2 good running backs.
Yeah, imagine Tevin Coleman running through those holes that Teron Ward was running through. Like, Ward looked okay, but just imagine Coleman. That's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have someone with like 4.3 speed on some of those runs, in some of those gaps that Devontae and those guys are getting. That's going to the house, with Coleman speed.
Yeah, but if Devontae goes out there, gets 75 yards on the ground, and then Coleman goes out there and on like 10 less touches gets, I don't know, 75, 80 yards, I'm cool with that. Everybody would be cool with that. Get them both the ball, get them both on the field, and the Falcons have a running game again. Holy shit.
It's been a while.
They can win games where they're up in the third quarter by running the ball and just extending the lead by running the ball and making like some dink and dunk passes like they did in 2010. This offense is all of the elements of 2010 combined with the having Julio of 2012. I just wish they had a Tony Gonzalez. The one thing this offense really is missing is a true just basketball player at tight end who knows how to use his body and get those first downs.
Yeah, I mean, like you look at all the teams they play, and they all have terrible safeties, pretty much. Like we just keep playing teams with terrible. It's like if we just had a tight end that could just dominate in the middle of the field, like it'd just be amazing right now. But
if they would have only traded up last year in 2014 for Jason Morrow, it would have been perfect. Or for Jeremiah Tauchu even in 2014. Because imagine that pass rush with Tauchu and Vic Beasley.
Be all right.
Don't get me talking draft. We're not gonna be able to do the preview of the next game.
Yeah. So Scott, you mentioned Teron Ward. I thought he did some good things. He looked pretty decent as a runner. Especially late in the game where it was pretty much like, hey, Teron, just here's the ball. Don't fumble. You're not going to get balls because they're stacking we have our backup offensive line trying to block their first string defense. But the one thing I still can't get over, it's a couple of days later, you got to chip J.J. Watt, man. You got to do that. Like I saw Devontae also missed a chip earlier in the game too, but it was just like, whatever. Devontae's getting yardage, so I can forgive him for a missed chip. But Teron Ward, you had one job, man. Just throw a shoulder in there. That's all you got to do.
You can't be the third string tight end missing chips or running back missing chips.
Pretty much.
No, you can't. You really can't.
Especially on J.J. Watt, because if you miss the chip on J.J. Watt, he's going to make you pay for it, and you're going to be on film as the reason J.J. Watt just made a play.
Yeah, you can get your quarterback killed.
That's how you end up with a negative 75 Pro Football Focus grade.
Yep.
One play. One.
I will say this was the worst game I've seen Ryan Schrader play in probably 2 years. And that includes the Charles Johnson games. Because J.J. Watt was just destroying him. But then I look back at it and I go, hold on. It's J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
It's J.J. Watt. It's forgivable because no one can block J.J. Watt.
Yeah, I was a little upset with how much they put him one-on-one with J.J. early in the game. It was just like,
why would you do that?
Like, why are you tempting fate like that? And he was beating him, and it was just like, help him out, Toilolo, throw a shoulder into J.J., chop block him, do something. Like, if it's illegal, then it's fine. Tyson Jackson would approve of that. It's just like do whatever you can to not let him, like. But Schrader did a decent job considering who he was playing against.
And to be fair, this was the one game that J.J. Watt was held to one or fewer sacks and hits. And Schrader was pretty much one-on-one with him most of the time. So even then, he did really good. It's just like, holy shit, you cannot compete with J.J. Watt. You were not ready for that monster.
No.
Scott, I'm curious, what were your thoughts? We saw a lot of our backup corners at the end of the game. What were your thoughts on what you saw from Jalen Collins?
Jalen Collins is getting killed on Twitter by the fan base because of 2 bad plays. That's the honest to God's truth. Outside of those 2 bad plays, he was looking really good. They used him in nickel packages instead of Phillip Adams most of the game. Like he wasn't playing primarily with that last unit. He was just staying in with that last unit because he needed the snaps. But they put him out there. He was covering DeAndre Hopkins early in the game with no problems. It wasn't until late in the game because I think they told him to play back a little bit more, and he's not used to that. He's used to going up, getting in the face, and pressing. And when he got to do that early in the game, he looked fine. It was late in the game that he got picked on. And he got picked on by DeAndre Hopkins, who's one of the best wide receivers in the game. And even then, he still knocked the ball away. He's a work in progress, but he's got a lot more potential, and he showed a lot of potential on Sunday that I didn't realize he really had. And I know people hate on Southward. I know they just destroy him.
Who hates on Southward?
I know you destroy him as well. But the 2 catches he allowed in his zone, one of them was a insane play by the receiver where he got body position and the ball, and Southward was right there and then pushed him out of bounds. Like, you can't ask him to do more than that outside of knocking the ball away. Then the other one was the touchdown, which I think Theodorowicz was him against Southward.
That's a mismatch.
Yeah.
He's just so much bigger than him.
It was Theodorowicz against Southward. And he's just not big enough to get around Theodorowicz to make the play on the ball. Because the guy's 6'8", 260 pounds. Like, he uses his body the way I wish Levine Toilolo would.
Yeah, I actually really wanted the Falcons to draft him. He
Yeah.
pretty much would have just been an extension of the offensive line. He wouldn't have missed a chip on J.J. Watt, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, but he might have been called for a chop on J.J. Watt, too.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm just saying, I thought the corners, honestly, they did pretty well. People are murking them because they see, oh no, Southward allowed a touchdown. But if you go back and you watch it, he played good coverage. Surprisingly played good coverage. They are improving from week to week. And that's all we can really ask for. And then Phillip Adams is Phillip Adams. He's not supposed to be on an NFL roster right now. The fact that he's the nickel back is just... Yeah, he's not supposed to be on an NFL roster right now. I'm just going to put it that way.
Okay.
Well, it's just nice that we have a little bit of depth at corner. Like, we're not one injury away from Dominique Franks and some other terrible corner from playing. I mean, we're young at corner, obviously, but I liked Jalen Collins at LSU, and Scott's right that when you make a play off, that's when he gets into a little bit of trouble because he likes getting his hands on guys. But he's an athletic dude, and frankly, I think that with Trufant, Alford, and Collins, we've got a good young trio, and I think that since all of them theoretically could play inside if you want, it allows you to be a little creative if you wanted to move around a little bit, even though we usually just keep Trufant on the right side. But it's a good problem to have that much young talent at corner.
That, and if you want to run a big nickel, you can just put Southward inside. It's not like Southward has horrible run defense or anything.
Yeah, he's not a terrible tackler.
Yeah, he's a good tackler. He played safety. Putting him as that nickel corner, if you want that big nickel set in certain situations, like in the red zone, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yep.
Okay.
And then, yes, that Tyson Jackson hit was dirty. All right? It was dirty. I'm going to be honest here. But I'd rather Tyson Jackson play dirty than play like the pussy he played like last year.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was pretty dirty. Like someone tweeted at me, it was like he was trying to prevent Cecil Shorts from getting up and tackle Nate Stupar. That's probably what his intention was, but it was like, okay, you don't need to do that. He's down. Yeah.
310 pounds versus 165 pounds. If Shorts actually weighs that much.
It's like Yokozuna.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Not that big, but yeah, pretty much.
Compared to Cecil Shorts, he's that big.
I don't know. Like Yokozuna against Rey Mysterio. All right, there you go. There's your comparison. It's not
Rey Mysterio. Oh my god.
I'm taller than Rey Mysterio. I know this because I've met Rey Mysterio, and I'm like that much taller than him.
Really? All right. Good to know.
I went to a live event in Charleston, and they all did the autographs at the end, like at the gate, and you get to meet all of them, shake their hands and shit. It's pretty cool. But he's like that much shorter than me. I'm 5'7". Dude's barely 5'5".
Interesting.
Well, there's your Rey Mysterio update, folks. In case
Scouting report on Rey Mysterio from Scott.
All right, guys. Let's get into this Redskins matchup. I think the Redskins are better than the Texans, so I think they'll be able to put up more of a fight than the Texans did last week. But like the Texans, I don't think they're a particularly good team. And the fact that we get to play them in the Georgia Dome, like their only 2 wins have been at home, and they've really barely been like Eagles outplayed them for most of that game. But the Eagles just kept messing up, and their offensive line was terrible that game. So, they lost. But the Eagles were the better team. They had like a touchdown wiped off the board because of a stupid penalty at the end of the half, and they would end up winning the game if that touchdown had counted. But it is what it is. So, are there any things that you guys see in this upcoming week that cause you to lose maybe about 2 minutes of sleep with this Redskins team?
I mean, if Kirk Cousins can play like he did against the Eagles, he might be somewhat scary. But the Falcons have the defensive line to match up with their offensive line. Outside of Trent Williams, who's a beast and a Pro Bowler and a monster, and I wish Jake Matthews played like him every week. Outside of Trent Williams, there really isn't anybody on that offensive line that's any good. Like, Brandon Scherf could be, but he's not there yet. Morgan Moses could be, but he's not there yet. And their center, they've played like 3 different centers this year because, well, injuries. And they played 3 or 4 different left guards this year because, again, injuries. But, I mean, outside of Trent Williams, no one on that offensive line scares me. If you this might be a game where we see Babineau get a sack, Claiborne get a sack, like, their interior defensive line is garbage. It's one of the worst in the NFL. And there's no chemistry. There's no cohesion. They miss stunts all the time. That Claiborne Beasley twist, where Claiborne goes out and Beasley goes in, that could potentially lead to 2 or 3 sacks this weekend.
At least some pressure, if not sacks.
Oh, yeah, or some stupid throws where Desmond Trufant gets like a pick 6, and people go, holy crap, Desmond Trufant, 2 fumble recoveries, a pick 6, allowing, 4 catches all year. Holy crap, this guy's a beast. So, yeah, their offensive line's going to get destroyed if the Falcons play up to their potential. And
I'm
if
interested.
Aaron can turn in a sack like last week, that would make Aaron happy too. But he has to learn how to use his hands. He's still Ricky Bobby out there.
I'm interested to see how our corners and safeties match up with their receivers because they've got some talent at receiver. Are they all healthy?
Pierre Garcon's questionable, and Deshaun Jackson's out.
Oh, well, then never mind. It really doesn't matter.
I think my Rashad Ross and somebody else.
Yeah, it's like Jamison Crowder, Rashad Ross, and...
Never mind.
Oh, yeah, my boy Andre, who I hate to say it because he's my boy, but he sucks.
He has not played well this year.
He is
but
bad.
he was good in Arizona.
They're kind of bad. He's like bad.
I blame it on Washington. He was good in Arizona.
I mean, I still want him in Atlanta, but like, yeah, he's bad. He's bad this year. He's not getting open. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you on him. Like he's looked, as Charles Barkley would say, he's looked terrible.
That's a terrible, terrible player right there.
He's just looked bad, and then yeah. That Washington offense is just a total clusterfuck. I mean, they got some decent run blocking, but I put more of that on the running backs than the receivers. Alfred Morris knows what the hell he's doing because he's been in that scheme forever. Matt Jones, I mean, he's a good running back. And then Chris Thompson is just speed, like pure unadulterated speed.
Mm-hmm.
If that took an Adderall. Their defense is what really scares me more than anything else. They've got a good defense. Not a great defense, but it is a good defense.
Is D. Hall going to play, or is he out?
He's got some sand in his vagina. He's going to be out.
What happens?
Hall's dealing with what Devin Hester's dealing with. He's got turf toe. Perry Riley, their starting middle linebackers, out. Kedrick Golston's questionable. And then Ryan Kerrigan, he's probably going to play, but he's banged up. He's got an injured hip, injured knee, couple of things that are going to hold him back a little bit. He's looked good this year, but he hasn't looked as good as he did last year.
Color is also hurt, too. He's been beat by a couple of deep balls these last couple of weeks because he's dealing with a knee issue, and he doesn't have the speed. And their safeties aren't good. I think, Deshaun Goldson and Trenton Robertson aren't center fielders, really. They don't really have that sort of ability. And so they've gotten beat deep a couple of times these last couple of weeks. So I think Julio could do some damage because he gets.
My favorite stats are the Julio game versus John Goldson. Because like last year, the Tampa game, 9 catches, 161 yards, 2 touchdowns. The second Tampa game, 8 catches, 119 yards. No touchdowns, but holy shit. You give him the ball a lot when he's going against Deshaun Goldson. And then in 2012, that big playoff game in San Francisco, they basically were double covering him with Chris Culliver and Deshaun Goldson. It was 11 catches, 182 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Julio can go off even if he's getting double covered by 2 of the worst players in the NFL.
So get excited to see Deshaun Goldston's Pro Football Focus grade is what you're saying.
It might be lower than Paul Warlow's against the Cowboys.
That's impossible.
Those it doesn't go any lower.
Minus
break the
9.1,
computer.
I'm sure it does. I've seen a minus like 12.2 before. That was Uani Unga's grade against the Falcons, I want to say.
Don't say that because Warlow will use it for motivation.
Oh, man.
Had to do it. It was right there. It was just hanging right in front of me.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this game is, to me, the only questions I have is if, for whatever reason, our defensive line doesn't do a good job with their run fits this week, and if Durant is out, and if we play Bartu there, if he's going to be, out of position a couple of times because he's not, no offense to Jopo Bartu, but I wouldn't say that, he's the most intelligent linebacker out there. Not saying he's dumb or anything, but, he's not the most instinctual guy out there. And if Thurisi, for whatever reason, comes back down to earth as a free safety and is just missing tackles left and right, and if William Moore is the bad version of himself, where, he just is trying to headhunt and is whiffing on tackles, then maybe the Redskins' running game might be a problem. But I do feel confident in our defensive line that even if those guys aren't playing their best football next week, that I think we'll be able to keep their running game in check, because that's That's the real, the Redskins' only real strengths are their running game on offense and, their front seven on defense, which I'm not too concerned about, but it might, like Houston was early last week, it might be a little problematic at times, but I do feel like Julio is going to do a lot of damage against that secondary, so as long as Matt Ryan can get him the ball, we'll be all right.
I tend to agree. It'll be interesting to see how running the ball with Freeman goes. If he comes back down to earth or if he keeps balling out. I think he'll probably have a pretty solid game, but I mean, if Riley's out and if Kerrigan's a little banged up, it's going to be tough to slow him down probably.
I think if they give him another, well, what's he done so far? Like 15 carries each of the last two, or he had 30 carries a couple weeks ago, but I think if they give him another 15, 20 carries and say Tevin Coleman's healthy, and they give him 10 to 15 carries, it could be a very, very surprisingly good running game this week. If between those two guys are getting 35 carries and 120 yards, the running game's doing its job. Even if
That'd be
that's
nice.
4 yards to carry.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the Redskins. Like I really do think the Falcons really have to like crap the bed to really be in too much trouble. I think the Redskins might be able to keep it competitive for maybe 2 quarters or something like that. But like it's if the Falcons just play their usual self, what we've seen these last 4 weeks, they should be okay. It just might be not the super huge blowout that was last week. So I mean, it's Kirk Cousins. Like if we get off to the same fast start that we got out to last week, then it's a wrap on the Redskins because, I like Kirk Cousins, but he's basically, at this point in his career, he's a poor man's Ryan Fitzpatrick, and that's not saying a whole lot.
That's not that bad, though. I mean, it's not horrible.
I mean, he's ideally a backup and a spot starter, and he is their full-time starter with RG3 running scout team defense. Like, that's not what you want.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario for Cousins is if you take what Fitzpatrick was in Buffalo, which was, it's not that bad. That's basically what Kirk Cousins, I think, his potential is. It's like, he's okay. Like, we could do worse, but...
Does that mean he's going to get paid $50 million for no reason?
Yeah, probably. And then get cut like this year? Yeah, probably.
All right. Good for him.
Yeah. I'm sure he'll do good with
the
it.
Matt Flynn strategy. I respect that.
Matt Flynn
I mean, yeah.
He's a record holder. You watch your mouth.
Fitzpatrick was definitely a name that stood out, so I can understand that. He's had that career arc.
Look, yeah. I mean, it's basically just, his goal is to be like the 24th best starting quarterback in the NFL. Like, if he can hit that, then he's overachieved in his career. That's basically what he's shooting for.
Considering how bad NFL players are, like, at quarterback, it probably wouldn't be that tough. There's maybe 18 or 19 good NFL quarterbacks. And then you got about 6 in that next tier, and Fitzpatrick and Cousins are in that tier right now. And then Ryan Mallett's below that, of course.
Yes.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, guys, you want to get into these mailbag questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Our first one comes from @JoeB.Tracy. He says, Matt Ryan has to lead the league in tip passes. What is the deal? And he actually does lead the league in tip passes, or batted passes. According to Pro Football Focus, our good friends over there, I think he has 8. So,
I'm going to go with who he played against. Jonathan Hankins and J.J. Watt are both really good at batting passes away. So I'm just going to put it on them and say they're probably why he has some issues with batted passes statistically right now.
Yeah, we play in a timing offense a lot of times. It isn't a lot, hey, Matt, drop back 5 steps and just, sit there and wait till somebody gets open. It's, a lot of 3-step drops and the ball comes out. And when you play that sort of offense, defensive linemen can sort of time up the the play, and so they know, okay, he's going to drop when he gets to that back step. If I'm not halfway to the quarterback, then I need to put my hands up. And sometimes, of course, you get lucky a couple of times, and you tip those passes. I think Nick Hayden got a couple in the Dallas game. J.J. Watt had 2. So it happens. It's not a big deal.
All the guys who
Right.
batted passes are 6'5" or taller. I just looked that up too. Nick Hayden 6'5", Jadeveon Clowney 6'6", J.J. Watt 6'6", and then in the Giants game, the one game that someone under 6'5" knocked one away was Brandon Merriweather when he knocked one away. But Robert
Yeah,
Ayers had 2, and he's 6'5". So a lot of it is just guys are tall, long arms, put their hands up in the passing lanes because Shanahan has a very timing-based offense. I think as we get through the season, we'll see less and less of that.
Okay, we got one from @MattStars. At what point will the narrative that we haven't played anyone be old?
When we play someone?
If the Falcons win the Super Bowl, then the whole question of, oh, they haven't played anyone. Well, it doesn't friggin' matter. They just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean,
That's how you shut it up.
the way I look at it is we're beating the teams that we are either at the same level as or are worse. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing right now, which is good to see because that wasn't always the case in the past couple of years. We'll get tested at some point, and we'll see how that goes. But we're doing what we need to do right now, and that's really all that should matter. I mean, we don't need to try and project us to go 16-0 because that's ridiculous. But we'll get tested at some point, but we just have to enjoy it while we're taking care of business. And that's what we're doing.
And here's the thing. If the Falcons have 2 losses and they're both to Carolina this year, because that's the only real tough team I see on the schedule outside of maybe Minnesota and maybe Indy. But if they
Minnesota
lose to
has a
Carolina
tough
twice,
defense.
huh?
Minnesota's a tough defense, and like Aaron has mentioned before, Rhodes can match up with Julio.
But that game is in Atlanta.
True.
Yeah.
So that does help the Falcons. And the defense will get more and more gelled to hold back Teddy. And I'm not as worried about mobile quarterbacks as much with Dan Quinn because he knows how to scheme against them.
Yeah, that is a nice thing.
But that being said, just kind of getting into my point, the real tough teams are Minnesota, Carolina, and Indy. Like, will the Falcons probably drop one between now and the bye? Yeah, they'll probably drop like at New Orleans and at San Fran. Like, just because those look like trap games to me. But other than that, like, I could see the Falcons winning, being 7-2 at the bye, losing another game or another 2 games between now and the bye and the end of the season, and going 12-4. And would anybody complain about being 12-4? I sure as hell won't. I know Aaron won't.
I won't. A little bit, just a little bit.
Because
Okay.
Aaron would be like, you know what, we could have had home field advantage if we would have just beat the Panthers once.
Look, to be honest with you, this season is all gravy to me. I mean, even if we finish 8-8 or something like that, it wouldn't bother me one bit. It's the first year. We're in a process, a long-term process to sort of correct some of the mistakes that we've made some of these recent off seasons. So to me, at the end of this year, whatever the Falcons are is whatever. I don't really care one way or the other. I hope the more games they win, the better. The farther they go, the better. But like, I'm not going to complain. If we lose a game, like, okay, oh well, moving on. I mean, it's already better than anything we've seen the last 2 years. So I've already got more enjoyment out of this season.
The worst we could be is 4-12.
If a nuke went off at the facility, they would go 4-12, and that would take a lot.
If Julio's hamstring pops, we could be a lot closer to 4-12 than 12-4. That's all I'm saying.
I think I'm not as worried about that because I think with Freeman, and I think you've got a offensive coordinator who knows how to scheme around it.
And we play some
so
terrible
much better
teams.
than any of these other guys.
That's the real main point right there. We play some terrible teams.
Yeah, I mean, our schedule is dog shit. I mean, let's be honest here. It's really dog shit.
Did I not say at the beginning of the year, 10-6 seems easy, 11-5 seems reasonable?
Yeah.
And if they come out guns blazing, they could be better.
Yeah. I remember saying back in July, I was like 12-4. And, the only reason I came down off of that just because of the offensive line, I thought it would be worse starting the season. But NFC East was overrated. AFC South is garbage, especially now that Indianapolis looks, mediocre at best right now. Yeah, it's literally the easiest schedule ever. I mean, that's what's driving this narrative because we really don't play anybody. Like we play probably like 5 of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL this year. People are gonna say it. Like, I mean, yeah, I just like people. You're gonna hear it a lot. Get over it. I mean, you're just gonna keep hearing. Like, if we're 9-0, you're gonna hear people say, you're gonna hear Chris Carter when you turn on ESPN or somebody like they haven't played anybody.
They haven't played anybody, but they've got a playoff spot locked up. So deal with it. They'll play somebody when they get into the playoffs.
Yeah, when we get into the playoffs, yeah, if we beat Arizona or Minnesota or Green Bay or hopefully Seattle or then people will shut up. But until then, we got a crappy schedule.
Let them talk.
This is the way for Dan Quinn to ease himself into the NFL by playing all these shitty teams and still winning. That way next year when we play like actually good teams, he might still win. It might be like a game or two worse, but it'll still be playoffs. This is a playoff team right now. They are playing very good football. If they can continue to play this well throughout the year, the Falcons will be in competition for the number 1 seed because of how shitty the schedule is. Would anyone complain if this team went 14-2? I sure as hell wouldn't. And if they came up with the argument of, they're 14-2, but they didn't play anybody, who cares? They got home field advantage. Deal with it. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. The 1972 Dolphins played the worst schedule of NFL history. It was like a 313 strength of schedule. And they went 17-0. People talk about them like they're the best team of all time. When they're really not. Because they won every game they played. They played their slate and won every game. Who gives a shit if they're playing nobodies if they can win out in the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Not me.
Do you care?
Nope.
I don't care. I won a Super Bowl. I don't care if the league's easy this year and they win it that way. That's not my problem.
Yeah.
That means the league has to do better. Put better teams in front of them.
Yeah. All right, guys. Next question comes from Nick Pasqualoni. I think he was on that 72 Dolphins team. Is Jake Matthews this good? Is he a legit top 10 left tackle already?
Yes. He still has some issues with power, but he's going to get so much better. And the zone blocking scheme really helps him out a lot.
Right.
It really makes his it really, really, really makes his run blocking. It can hide any deficiencies they have because it's just, hey, Jake, get in the way.
I think that, it's not that much to ask to be in the top 15 left tackles in general. Top 10, it's maybe a little bit more difficult, but I definitely say he's in that. If he's not top 10, he's right next to that. And he's only in his second season, so I think that he's not elite by any means, but he's the best left tackle we've had in a very long time, and that is A-okay with me.
I can't name 10 left tackles that are playing better. Like, you got Joe Thomas, Andrew Whitworth, Tyron Smith, Trent Williams, and I'm starting to blank at the fifth name. Like, that's Jason Peters. Like, after that, who else is there? There's really, there's such a demand for quality of any sort offensive lineman that the way he's playing exceptionally well. I mean, he's right up there in that top 5 or 6 right now, just because there's 5 guys who I can say are definitively better than Jake Matthews.
Yeah, I probably, if I was power ranking the left tackles, I probably wouldn't put him 10, just because I'd probably put some guys that are hurt right now, like Eugene Monroe and Ryan Clady, above him. But he's playing, he is, based off of his play right now, he is one of the 10 best tackles in the league. So, um, those guys aren't playing, so they can't really be counted at this point. But yeah, I think this is kind of what you hope he was. It was one of those things where it's like, a lot of his negativity last year because he wasn't really that good at run blocking because we played in a power scheme, and that's not really what he is. He's not a guy that's going to move guys off the ball. But now we play in a zone blocking scheme, and it's more about getting position. But he is moving guys off the ball because he knows how to get angles and whatnot and do those things. So the big reason why he's playing so well is because his run blocking has improved immensely this year. And that's really what you're looking for when you're talking about a top 10 left tackle. You're not just looking at a guy who's a great pass protector who only gives up, 3 or 4 sacks in the season. You're talking about a guy that can, open up run lanes. And I think right now he's doing that. He did a great job against Houston, a lot better job against Clowney than I thought he would. And, yeah, it's all good right now for Jake Matthews. All right, let's talk a little bit more about blocking. At Matt Stars asks, zone blocking scheme. Okay, this syntax is weird. Okay, let me see if I.
The zone blocking scheme is so successful, what defenses or schemes give it trouble?
Oh, okay, all right.
So part of what makes the zone blocking scheme successful is you got a bunch of athletic linemen. They all move together, and then the hole opens up, and the running back just finds it. That's what makes it successful. The whole point of the zone blocking scheme is that it's successful against any scheme or defense. But if you really want a good one to really counteract it and balance it, you got to get a penetrating one-gap 3-4 scheme, like what Bum Phillips designed and what Wade Phillips runs out in Denver. If you took, and you've got to have the players to penetrate and attack the way that he has out in Denver too. You got to have the Von Millers. You got to have the DeMarcus Wares of the world in order to get those tackles and in order to get those guys ahead of it. Because if you have guys attacking gaps that can actually penetrate, you're going to do great. But it's really tough to find a scheme that's good against the zone blocking scheme. And it's one of the oldest things in football. Now, will the Panthers give the Falcons some trouble because they've got a lot of talent in a one-gapping 4-3? Yeah. I mean, Kawan Short's not fun to play against. Charles Johnson's not fun to play against. Starr's a hell of a player. They've got Jared Allen, who is going to ease into a role and be better than Coney Ely was. And then they've got 3 of the best linebackers out there. Now, if Luke Kuechly's still hurt and still dealing with that concussion, I mean, that defense is completely different and it's not as tough to play against. But you still have to worry about that run defense. And then the Seahawks, they run basically a 3-4 with a guy with his hand in the dirt. That's all Elio is. That's all the Seattle scheme is. That's all Atlanta's scheme really is right now. It is a 3-4, but instead of it being a weak outside linebacker, it's just a defensive end with his hand in the dirt that rushes every play. That's all the scheme is. So that's your best fit. A penetrating one-gap 3-4, or a Seattle-style scheme, which is just a 3-4 with a guy with his hand in the dirt and guys that can penetrate. If you don't have guys that can penetrate, if you don't have your St. Louis Rams level defensive line, that Philadelphia Eagles level defensive line, that Eagles defense that the Falcons played was one of the best run defenses they played against. And they still got almost 100 yards because it's just an effective scheme.
One thing that I think that the zone blocking team struggles with sometimes, or at least it did when we used to run it, is in short yardage and goal line situations, because there's just not a lot of room to maneuver in open up holes when you're trying to. You have to win with power in those situations. So that's one area to look at. But I agree, in general, it's going to open a lot of holes, and if you have a running back with good vision, you can make a lot of hay with that.
Yeah. I mean, like all schemes, it really boils down to who you got running it. There is no real magic scheme in the NFL. That's why, certain things are in vogue at a certain time, but, just saying, oh, we're going to be a zone blocking. There's plenty of teams that are zone blocking teams that can't run the football at all. I think with our scheme, the players and teams that have given our guys the most trouble are teams that have those big physical guys up front that can use their power and get penetration. We saw that with Fletcher Cox in week 1. We saw that with Benny Logan in week 1. Vince Wilfork did a decent job against Mike Person early in the Houston Texans game. Hankins gave our guys a little bit of trouble. So, you see some of these upcoming matchups, maybe Jason Hatcher, maybe Stephen Paya, I don't even know who plays for San Francisco anymore, but, Jarrell Casey, some of these guys that can get upfield and sort of knock our guys back could give our scheme a little bit of trouble.
San Francisco's scheme is not coherent right now. It's going to take them a while before they can get coherent.
Okay.
Because Mancini is putting in his 2-gapping scheme instead of the 1-gap that they ran last year. It's throwing them off completely.
But like the thing is about our scheme, and we saw this a lot against Philadelphia, and this was what we were, when we were all in love with Tevin Coleman before some guy by the name of Devontae showed up. A lot of those times, a lot of those penetrating guys, our guys can get away from that, because the zone scheme is about getting laterally, and sometimes those guys will get upfield, but we're outrunning in this, creating gaps and creases behind them, and so it's good. Like, yeah, I mean, when we play Minnesota, like, I'll be worried about whether or not we can run against their defensive line, just because they have some really good players up front. But and as Scott said, Carolina. But other than that, it's just like, yeah, there's nothing that on deck probably until we get to the playoffs that I'm worried defensively that can handle our scheme.
The offensive line has also gotten a lot better from week 1 to now. They've gotten a lot more cohesive as a unit. Because in week 1 they were only given about a yard and a half off the ball for the running backs. Now they're giving almost 2.5 yards off the ball just in 4 weeks. I'm not saying that's going to get exponentially bigger, but this offensive line could end up being one of the better offensive lines in football. By the time that the season ends, we'll look back at the line and be like, wow, that's arguably one of the best lines the Falcons have had in recent memory.
Not saying a lot.
Not saying a lot, but overall, like, pass blocking, run blocking, Matt Ryan's been sacked 6 times, and the line's averaging 100 yards rushing per game. So, it's doing their job.
All right, we got one from Jason ATL 153. He asked, which team has a better record by week 14, Falcons or Panthers? And I hope Hester is back by then.
I'm going to go with the Falcons, just because the Panthers have some real teams on their schedule that the Falcons don't have. Like, they get to go to Seattle after their bye week, and then they get the fun of playing Green Bay. And then after that, they don't really play anybody. But they get Seattle and Green Bay. So I could see Atlanta being, 10-2, and then Carolina being 9-3 or 9-4, just because, every team is going to lose a trap game or two. I could see that Dallas game being tough because Des Bryant and Tony Romo are supposed to be healthy by then.
Yeah.
I could see that New Orleans game being tough if all those guys are healthy, that second New Orleans game, because they had trouble with New Orleans without a fully healthy roster. So
I'll say Carolina. I mean, it's going to be – I think they'll have pretty close records, if not the same, by that time that game comes around. But Carolina, I think, just has – I mean, that front seven, when they stay healthy, if they get Kuechly back, that could sustain a lot of things for that defense. Josh Norman's a really good corner. I guess it just depends on if Cam plays consistently or if he has his ups and downs. I mean, I think that there's at some point, I think we're going to hit a little bit of a wall as a team. I don't think we're just going to keep tearing people apart the entire year. I think we're going to have, I mean, I know one of the tweets referred to this, but we're going to have a short week against New Orleans coming up. So I think there are a couple games that we might slip up on. We'll see, but I'll say Carolina, but not by a lot.
Yeah, I think the Falcons have the easier road, so I'll probably put money on the Falcons right now. That they'll probably be like, as Scott said, probably like 10-2, and Panthers might be 9-3 or something like that. The Panthers' issue is going to be teams that can score points. So a team like Green Bay, and if Dallas is fully healthy by then, and being the team that people were hyping them up to be preseason, then they could be trouble for that defense because Carolina really doesn't have much on offense to score a lot of points. I know they scored a bunch against the Bucs, but I think they had 2 defensive touchdowns. They had 5 turnovers. So you're going to score a lot of points when you +4 in turnover ratio. So I'll probably say the Falcons, but I think as both of these guys have been saying, it'll be pretty close. They'll be neck and neck, and that game might decide who wins the division really in Week 14. All right, so okay. At Brosiv929 asks, how many yards will the running game get for the rest of the year?
Well, currently the Falcons are getting 114 yards a game. I would say that throughout the rest of the year, they'll improve by 10 to 15 yards. So we'll just go high. So 130 times 12 plus the 454. They should finish with about 2,000 yards on the ground this year.
I say we'll get to maybe 15 to 1,600 total yards. I think we'll have some slower games, but I think that overall we'll hover around the 100-yard average per game.
Yeah, they'll probably be somewhere in that 110 to 115 range per game, probably. I think we'll have some really big games, and we'll have some slower games, and it'll average it out to being around that. So whatever the math is on that, 16, 17, 1,800 or something like that. All right. Birchfield asks, any matchups in the Redskins game that you're looking forward to seeing?
Julio versus Goldson and Culliver again. He might have 200 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Hope so.
I'm curious to see Jake against Kerrigan. I think Kerrigan's the type of guy that can give him some trouble. So I'll be curious to see if he can handle Kerrigan pretty well.
Jake's done pretty well in pass rush this year. I mean, he's only allowed 4 hurries, and they were all to, I want to say 3 of them were to Clowney.
But Kerrigan's the best guy he's faced all year.
What?
Kerrigan's the best guy he's faced all year. So I want to see how he does against Kerrigan.
I'll agree with that. I mean, I think Barwin's pretty good, but
he's okay. Whatever. All right. Tom, you have any matchups you want to see this week?
We'll see how our offensive line does against their front 7. See if we keep running the ball as well as we have. I hope we do, but it will be interesting. And actually, a Beloit alum, Derek Carrier, plays on the Redskins disaster dumpster fire of a team, so we'll see if he gets any playing time.
I think he might start because Reed is hurt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, hell yeah. That'll be fun to watch.
Is he good?
As a Beloit alum, I have to say he's good.
He's
but
right.
he was an undrafted kid. He's really athletic, especially because he came from D3. He could have walked on to Wisconsin, but he wanted to play basketball and football. He's got good hands, hard worker. He was on the 49ers before they traded him because they had too many tight ends. So we'll see if Cousins gets in the ball.
He had a couple of catches against the Eagles last week. He's all right. He's not a guy that you're not scared of him or anything, but he's I'd probably take him over Toilolo, but that's not saying a lot.
I would take him over Toilolo too, but I'm friends with him, so.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, all right, I can understand that.
We got another one from Evan Birchfield. What were and now are your thoughts on Kyle Shanahan?
I liked the hire when they got him because they said, oh, hey, they're going to hire an offensive coordinator who knows how to give the Falcons the perfect offense for their personnel. And now I'm just like, okay, Kermaning, it's the right coordinator for the Falcons. I've wanted the Falcons to run that Shanahan scheme since 1998.
Okay.
Well, I remember Aaron and I talking about this a while back that we were excited for the fit with our offensive line, and as Aaron quoted at that point, really it was just Justin Blaylock that didn't really fit because, quote, he doesn't really do anything well. So,
he said, to be fair, he says at this point in his career, he doesn't really do anything well. And then Blaylock retired, so you're like, okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So
it wasn't.
I was excited. I know. I know it wasn't a diss at Blaylock. It's just really fun to say. Because,
he's competent at everything, but he doesn't do anything particularly well.
Exactly. So I was pretty excited because I thought it would be a good fit, especially for Matthews. I think it's easier to make a average offensive line good in a zone blocking scheme than in a power scheme because you're asking them to generate a lot of movement and win a lot of one-on-one matchups when you're running a power scheme, whereas a zone blocking scheme, if you can just get off the ball and get in position and wall people off, you can get away with that a lot more because that's pretty much what the scheme is. So I was excited about that. I wanted to see how he would do with play calling and everything, but he's done a great job featuring Julio. If he could figure out how to get Matt to work Roddy into the game, then I think everything will be firing on about as well as it could as far as on all cylinders. So very happy with the hire now.
Yeah, I think he's done a lot of good things. I think he's done outside the Giants game where there was just a whole bunch of quick throws and screens. I think he's done an excellent job designing an offense to feature Julio. I think he's really got Patrick DeMarco engaged because he's using a lot of 12 personnel and 22 personnel with the play action and whatnot, and that's why DeMarco. I think that's a big reason why DeMarco has improved so much, just because how important, even though he doesn't play a ton of snaps, but he's very important to the offense, particularly with that play action. I complain a little bit about some of the protections they used last week with, leaving Schrader one-on-one with Watt. But, it's any complaints I have about Shanahan are very minor complaints. They're just kind of like nitpicks, really, just because, we're Falcon fans and we have to nitpick everything. At least I do. I think I was very excited when we hired him. I really thought he would bring a whole lot of new things to the table. I think Dirk Cutter's scheme was pretty tired. I think whoever our offensive coordinator was before that, Mike Malarkey, I couldn't even remember him. That's how bored I was with that offense. But I think one of the issues with the Falcons is they were very, very vanilla with their schemes. Dirk Cutter, they talked a lot about running those 4 verticals, and they really didn't run them. It was just like, okay, we'll just run 4 curl routes. Everybody runs at the sticks and turn around, and Matt Ryan will throw you the ball. And that was very easy to defend at a certain point as we got further and further along in that offense. And I think the great thing about Shanahan is he's bringing a lot more wrinkles to the offense, particularly with how he used Julio, that makes teams have to figure out how we're going to scheme things and just creating opportunities for Julio to get open, creating opportunities for guys like Hankerson and Roddy to get open. And we saw that rub route last week against Houston that Hankerson took 55 yards and almost scored on. And it's maybe a little illegal, but we got away with it, so we'll take it. But
everybody gets away with the rub route.
Yeah, so I think he's done a great job. All right, next question comes from Hard Act to Follow. He asks, do you guys think the defense should continue to play more press coverage?
That's the scheme. That's what Dan Quinn wants. When you got Trufant and Alford, and that's what they do best. Well, Trufant does everything well, but you got Alford. That's what Alford does best. That's what Collins does best. That's what Salvador has been doing really well. Is he's getting in the guy's face, he's redirecting the route, and he's throwing off timing. I love press coverage. I love schemes that are like, hey, let's attack the quarterback, and it works. It really does work. Continue to play the scheme the way it's designed, and play press coverage. Do it all year long. Play more of it. Increase the percentage every single week. More and more and more. Press coverage all week. All year.
Yeah, if we're playing the strength of our corners, I think press is definitely the strongest thing through all four of them, like Scott said. I think we have some problems when we have Collins and Southward playing off. I think Alford can play off a little bit better than they can, but in general, I think that they're best when they're playing press, and I think that Collins especially really likes to press. So, yeah, I'm fine with playing more press coverage, especially now that we have solid safety help over the top. At least if Allen's healthy, when he gets healthy. Last year I might have been a little more nervous about it, but
Teresi looked really good this past week.
That's 1 week, though.
Yeah.
Let him work his way in against these bad receivers until he can finally go up against good ones. That seems to be what's working for the Falcons. They play bad teams and they're getting all these guys set up, and Nate Stupar even looks good.
Yeah. I was gonna let that go.
Just kidding. Your boy looks awesome. I hope he plays in Durant, and if Durant can't go this week at weak side.
I think that would be a smart decision now that Brooks Reed's back. I think with the press coverage, I think it works. I think Alfred is better fit for that. I thought it was interesting because we're not really seeing our guys jam as much as the Seahawk corners did, but there's an obvious reason because we don't have 6'3" corners like that, like they do over there. But we did see last week with Alfred sort of jamming Hopkins on that one really good play on, I think it was like a 3rd down or something like that, and he did a great job doing that. So it'll be interesting to see if they, if we, as the season goes on, if we're seeing more and more of our guys getting their hands on their receivers. I'd like to see that. So yeah, I think press coverage is really in today's NFL. When you look at some of these high-powered offenses, and you look at past teams like the Patriots and the Colts and the Broncos and the Saints and whatnot, the teams that they've struggled against, and that's one of the reasons why Seattle's defense has been so effective recent years, has always been teams that can jam the receivers at the line of scrimmage and throw off the timing of their offense. For years and years, New England, back when Pittsburgh's defense was really, really good, Knight Taylor was still good. That was the team that New England had the most troubles with Dick LeBeau throwing all those blitzes at them and jamming receivers. So it's one of those things where I do feel like if you have the guys that can do it, then it is the superior way of attacking offenses in today's NFL. So, I'm all for it for the Falcons.
And it's really the only time you can ever touch a receiver. Every other time you get flagged almost immediately, and even if you jam and hold, you'll get flagged for it. So I think it's really taking advantage of really the only way you can get your hands on them and beat them up a little bit. So I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. If Brent Grimes was still here, it wouldn't be good. But Brent Grimes was a great off corner because he had great technique and good instincts and those types of things. For some guys, off coverage makes more sense, but we don't really have those guys anymore, so it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Evan Birchfield asked the question that Tom alluded to earlier, how do you think this team will handle a short week? Washington, then New Orleans 4 days later.
I'm not as worried about it. If it was Mike Smith, I'd be worried, but Dan Quinn seems to have a good thought process on how to handle his team, how to manage his team. I don't know what they do that's that different during the week, because it sounds like they do the 24-hour rule. Hey, that game, boom, we did this. All right, focus on next week. But it's just he's got an energy, and he makes sure that everybody's healthy, everybody's rested. He doesn't do as much pads, from what I've been told, as a lot of coaches do. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe they're just not as beat up heading into games.
I'm not super worried about it. I mean, is that at New Orleans or is that in the Georgia Dome?
It's at New Orleans.
That's the one thing that would make me a little nervous. Is it's just tough to play a rival on the road. It'll be a good first test for Quinn to see how he handles the short turnaround. I'm not particularly worried about it, but it also depends on if we come out of this game healthy or not, because obviously it's tough to get guys healthy when you only have a short week, but I'm not super worried about it. It'll be a good test.
Yeah, that was going to be the point I was going to bring up. It really comes down to health. Like if the short week is terrible when you have guys that are nicked up and they're 50-50, like if they had the extra 2 or 3 days of rest, then they'd be good to go. But on that short week, you have to sort of save them and hold them off because you want to keep guys healthy for the rest of the season. So, but I do expect, assuming the Falcons are pretty healthy, they'll get up for that game. It's a New Orleans game. It doesn't matter who the coach is. They'll get up for that game. So I'm not too worried. All right. At Delable Think asked, what are your thoughts on Allen and Therese so far? If we do, how high do you see us drafting a free safety next year?
I mean, if they're looking the way they're looking, you could see not a single free safety draft. The Falcons only have 5 picks next year.
I think a free safety is probably likely, just because I think it's I haven't done complete homework, but from at least some of the tape I was watching this summer, it's a pretty strong safety class coming out next year, with a couple of guys that could really fit this scheme as that center fielder. I think Allen has done a great job. I think Therese did a solid job last week. So we'll have to see how the rest of the season plays out. But we've seen some struggles with Allen against the Giants and against the Cowboys. So if he has more of that up and down season, I could see the Falcons taking a free safety, maybe depending on who's available. If there is that type of player, maybe in the late round 1, if there are no other pressing needs, but probably round 2 or 3, I would say.
I agree with that. I think that Allen was a good find, and he was a good, potential stopgap. If he's more than that, that's great. But if he's not, I think we'll want to bring someone in to compete and add depth, regardless of how Therese plays. So I don't know. I would expect probably in the day 2 range, a safety to be targeted. But I mean, it depends on how the board falls, obviously. But
it also depends on if there are any safeties that are worth drafting, period, that really fit the scheme. And based on what I've seen of college football this year, I mean, I don't really see anybody that's going to be better than Ricardo Allen next year. Like, I don't see anybody who's that great deep safety.
Okay. I liked I haven't seen him yet this year, but I thought what's his name, Bush from Miami, I thought he was pretty decent.
I mean, I kind of like Saunders from Georgia, but I think he's a sophomore.
No. All right. Kaika Hall asks, if the draft were tomorrow and you're the Falcons with a late first-round pick, which player are you taking?
That is a tough one.
I've got a couple names to throw out there. One that I would love to see, and this is just because I'm a big fan of him, and I think it would be fun to see how we use him, is Sua Cravens from USC. Questionable how he would fit just because he's kind of a safety linebacker hybrid.
Weak side
But
linebacker.
yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
he came in as a safety. He's just a huge safety.
Yeah, he's got the build to play linebacker in the NFL. Put him at weak side.
I
Derek
know,
Brooks
but it
him.
would be so. I think would be a really fun guy to be able to match up with tight ends and coverage. You can blitz him. He's great in space. He's a really explosive, powerful player. I'd really love to see what Quinn could do with him. Josh Doxson, if we're going to target our wide receiver, would be an awesome complement to Julio, just because he has awesome ball skills. He's not necessarily super explosive, but I'd really love to see what he could do opposite Julio, especially in this scheme if we have Shanahan for a few years before he gets picked off. And then I don't know if he'll declare or not, but if he did, I would not mind Carl Lawson if he can stay healthy opposite Beasley. So those are three guys that I thought might be there at the end, if we're even at the end of the first round.
See, it's funny because I kind of like Shaq Lawson better than Carl Lawson.
Interesting.
I think you could put Shaq Lawson as that starting strong side end, and then have him play that Michael Bennett role. He's got the same kind of frame. And yeah, I know you'd be talking about another Clemson first-round pick. Atlanta could have a whole lineup of Clemson guys all on the field at once, with Malachi Goodman and Grady Jarrett and Beasley and Shaq Lawson. But it wouldn't be that bad to have those four guys and pass rush sets. I think Goodman long-term, his role is what Claiborne's in. But yeah, I really like Shaq Lawson. I think he can fit that Michael Bennett role. He's extremely athletic. He makes plays all around the ball, and he's just fun to watch. And I think when all said and done, he will be a first-round pick.
Yeah, I'm not caught up on my draft stuff, but a couple of guys I like. I'll throw out a pick guy, Tyler Boyd. He's good. Jonathan Allen, I think the defensive end for Alabama could possibly be that Michael Bennett type of guy in the defense. If Miles Jack, his injury causes him to fall, yeah, let's get him. So
another name that could be fun is Corey Robinson of Notre Dame.
Yep.
He could be that big, tall possession receiver that you put across from Julio, who's faster than Hankerson.
Okay, another draft question from Jelani234. He asks, position the Falcons take in the first round barring no injuries?
No idea. Could go anywhere. Could go linebacker, could go free safety. The only positions that I know they're not taking, quarterback, cornerback, and I would say running back are going to be those first three rounds. Everything else is up for fair game. And, of course, they're not going to draft a fullback because you don't need a fullback when you've got Patrick DeMarco.
There you go.
Yeah, you could go a lot of different ways. I would almost prefer that we not go interior offensive line, even though I think it's something that we could bolster up, at least especially depth-wise. But Dimitrov doesn't have a very good track record picking up interior offensive linemen. And so I would rather not use a high pick on that and go somewhere else.
Here's the thing: if the offensive line plays as it is, will they even need offensive linemen based on the contract situations? Schrader's a restricted free agent. Asamoah comes back probably next year healthy, and I think he plays better than Chester does. Person is on a cheap 3-year contract, and then Levitre's on a 4-year contract, and then you got Matthew still on his rookie deal. So I mean, they'd all be signed. You could basically have just one change, and you're upgrading from Chester to Asamoah.
I don't think Asamoah is going to be on the team. I think they're going to cut him.
I think his pick injury was more serious than they were letting on, and that's why they put him on injured reserve. That's why he wasn't cut. and wasn't an injury settlement, I think he'll have a shot at least next year to have his job back because he played well in the zone blocking scheme in Kansas City.
I hope you're right, but I'm afraid Aaron's right.
I think the only chance he comes back is if Kyle Shanahan leaves.
Or, hell, trade him for Jimmy Graham once the Seattle Seahawks realize Jimmy Graham doesn't want to be there. He'd be their best offensive lineman right away.
I do think there's a decent chance the Falcons use a high pick on an offensive lineman. I don't think Schrader is the long-term fit for what they want in a right tackle in the scheme. I don't think he's quite as athletic as they want. But, he might be injured. He might be dealing with an injury that they're not talking about because I don't think he's moving particularly well and not as well as he did last year. But I probably wouldn't go in the first round just because I think Kyle Shanahan, buys into that whole Alex Gibbs style, which is we're not going to use high picks on a offensive lineman unless it's a guy like Trent Williams, who's an elite athlete like that. So if I was betting, I'd probably say you're probably betting on a defensive player in the first round next year. Probably another pass rusher, maybe a linebacker, maybe a safety. So I think those probably be your safest bets. I think they want to get a wide receiver, but I doubt they would use a high pick on them unless it's just a ridiculous value pick at the end of the first round. Tight end is also on the board. I haven't really done any evaluation if there are any first round caliber tight ends.
It's going to depend on if juniors come out or not. If it's just seniors, it's going to be decent, but not great.
Yeah, college isn't really producing that many good tight ends, on an annual basis like it used to be. It used to be there was always at least one good, Todd Heap, Algie Crumpler type of guy that came out every year. And, we get that like maybe once every 2 or 3 years now. So I don't know if this year is going to be one of those years.
It'll be interesting to see if O.J. Howard comes out because he's got so much potential, but he just really hasn't. He kind of disappeared last year. So if he comes out, I would not mind taking a long look at him.
I will say, going to Aaron's point on offensive line, there's a lot of centers that you can get in the mid rounds that would be fun to have, especially Jake's little brother, Mike.
Yeah.
Wouldn't mind that.
And then talking tight ends, I'm unimpressed with pretty much all of them right now. The guys that I want to see are all 17. The O.J. Howards, the Jake Butts, the kid from Oregon, I want to say Bayless or Munt. Those guys are going to be fun. And Leggett from Clemson. Like the 2017 tight end class was so damn good. The 2016 is so damn terrible. I'm not seeing anything great. But if a bunch of these guys declare, they could get really good really quick.
All right. I got another draft question from Jelani234. How early would you draft a receiver next year?
As high as the first round.
Same.
Especially
Depends on the guy.
if Treadwell somehow slips.
If Treadwell's there, oh my God, we have to draft him.
Because Treadwell again, it all comes down to supply and demand and talent. And when the talent's there at receiver like there could be, you got Treadwell, you got Michael Thomas, Mike Williams out of Clemson would be a great fit. And it all depends on how his neck is, though. And then Demarcus Robinson out of Florida could be a good one, too. There is a lot of talent at receiver.
Yep.
Yeah. I personally, I'm not a huge fan of taking skill positions like running back or wide receiver in the first round just because they tend to be really deep. But it is one of those situations where when you can sit there and say, this is a guy who's a legit top 15, top 10, top 20 talent, that potential number one guy. I think that's if you're drafting a potential number one receiver, and obviously in Atlanta, whoever we draft is not going to be a number one receiver because of Julio. But if you think, oh, he has the skill set to be a number one guy, that 1A type of player, then draft him in the first round. But I do think right now it'll depend on what we do with Roddy, what we do with Hester next year. If we re-sign Hankerson, all three of those guys could be gone next year. And if that's the case, then there's probably a good chance we'll use a first or second round pick on a wide receiver. If all three of those guys come back, then I think the Falcons might wait. There's usually always a big vertical stretch receiver that usually slips into the third or fourth round. Guys like Martavis Bryant, guys like Keenan Allen, and whatnot, that can line up on the outside and be that guy. If the Falcons could find that guy in the third or fourth round and draft him then. But usually, I think for what the Falcons need at the position, you kind of have to draft those guys early. We don't need another slot receiver. We have too many slot receivers right now. So, yeah. All right. We got one from Scott Emmanuel 15. How many times do you think we pick off Kirk Cousins?
Depends on the flow of the game, but it wouldn't shock me if we saw 3 picks.
I'd say 1.
Just because
I think we'll get 2.
it all depends on all depends on the flow of the game. I could see up to 3, but if I had to put a number 2, makes most sense. You got 2 of the best corners he's played against all year. You got one of the better defenses he's played against all year. It'll be fun.
If we start fast, if they have to ask Cousins to drop back 40 times or 40 or 50 times, it's going to be a lot of picks because he'll force some throws. That's his MO. It's like when they get behind, he's going to force some throws, and there are going to be a lot of picks. And you're right, Scott. It could be 3 or 4 or even more than that. I think didn't he have a 5 interception game last year?
Something like that.
Yeah, if the Falcons start fast, then it could be a really big number. If they can hand the ball off all the way into the second half, then it might just be 1 or 2. All right, our last question comes from @DirtyBirds. He says, name one problem that you've noticed on defense and offense in the first 4 games.
Missed tackles.
Yeah, on defense, missed tackles, and I will put this out there. Warlow went from probably the 5th best defensive player 2 years ago to the worst defensive starter on the team this year. Aaron's been wanting me to admit this for a while.
Yeah.
But he is the worst starter on the team. And I think that says more about what they did this past offseason than anything else. Shit. Tyson Jackson looks better than he does. Tyson Jackson has a clear defined role, too, that fits his strengths. Dan Quinn's putting people where they win, and the only thing on defense that I think this defense needs to really bring it over the top is that not Bruce Irvin, but Bobby Wagner type. You get that Bobby Wagner type middle linebacker in the middle, this defense could be unstoppable. That's the big hole I'm seeing right now. I think free safety is less important than that spot. And then on offense, a tight end who can go out there, put his body in the way on the running plays, and actually block. Falcons need Algie Crumpler. Like the reincarnation of 2004 to 2006 Algie Crumpler. A tight end who can block, but then also go out there and get 600, 700 yards. That's what they need. They don't need Tony G. They need Crumpler.
Yeah, they do.
Howard's the guy.
One problem I've noticed on offense, person tends to struggle with good nose tackles, but it hasn't really been an issue because Freeman and Coleman are so good. Defense, I wouldn't call it a problem, but I don't think the pass rush has been all that great. It's been okay, but it isn't like world shattering. But then again, compared to what we fielded the last 8 years, it kind of is world shattering. So again, it's not a problem. But I don't sit here and think like the concern I have right now with the Falcons is when we get to the playoffs. And we have to face a team like the Packers or something like that. I don't really, right now, as the pass rush stands today, I don't really feel like we're going to do a great job affecting Aaron Rodgers in that game. And I think he's going to be able to pick apart some of the weak points in our defense as we sit today. But again, we're a long way from that, so things will change. Tom, you got any problems on offense that you noticed?
I mean, besides needing a tight end, it'll just be pass protection. That's not necessarily a huge problem, but where the offensive line is playing better than I thought they would, but that's just going to be something that I'm going to keep an eye on. So I'd say tight end and pass pro.
Yeah, let me add about the pass rush. I think what Scott and I have said multiple times on this show, Beasley's going to start off a little slower than I think a lot of expectations probably put him at. But I think by the time we get to December, he should be hitting his stride. So I do feel like there's a pretty good chance that what I just said about our pass rush not being great, I'll be singing a different tune by the end of the season. But like if we had to play the Packers right now, I'd be very nervous about that, about what Rodgers could do to us. But
I think everybody would be, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Their offensive line doesn't impress me at all.
But it doesn't really matter. That's the scary thing.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't. I mean, their offensive line didn't scare me when they won the Super Bowl. They don't even have Jordy Nelson, and the offense isn't missed a beat.
Hit them.
Yeah, but there's like 4 teams that can do that.
More than anything else, they don't have a left tackle or anybody who can handle speed. They don't really have a right tackle or anybody who can handle speed. I think with Beasley and Schofield, you've got guys who can create pressure on the edge. It's really, can you create stuff on the inside and not give him those lanes to run around and create stuff with?
Yeah, that's the problem.
He doesn't really have the interior linemen outside of Lindsley and Lang that really, like Lindsey, Lang, and Sitton are solid, but you can create pressure on them. So it's really just how do you...
Top 5 guard. Sitton's pretty good.
Sitton's pretty good, but he hasn't been playing as well as he had in previous years.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
The problem is that even if you can get pressure on him, you have to sack him. If you don't sack him, he's going to flush out and create huge chunk plays downfield. And there are teams that can get pressure on him, but they either don't sack him or he evades the pressure, and then you're paying for it because your corners are trying to play pass coverage longer than they should be. So it sounds really easy to get pressure on him, but he's a smart quarterback and he's really mobile. So
yeah, and even when you do sack them, they are literally 4 seconds away from hitting a big bomb to Cobb, so it didn't really matter. They could be 2nd or 15, and then he hits a 50-yard bomb, and you're like, oh, okay, that sack didn't really matter at all.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right, folks, that is our show this week. It's an extra long episode. I think we did 2 hours, so we got maximum Tom Melton this week, maximum Scott Aaron. Tom, people can find you at T Melton Scouting on Twitter. Is there anything else you want to plug?
Nope.
All right, there you go.
Just my jokes on Twitter.
A lot of Dante Robinson material.
I'm trying to diversify.
Okay.
That I'm like Kevin Hart. I got famous on Dante Robinson. Now I need to start diversifying.
You really do.
It's still my bread and butter. Don't get me wrong. But
did I tell you about that one time a deer hit my car?
Was it Dante Robinson?
You didn't finish the story. Holy crap. No, I was driving down the street in Charleston, and a deer hits my car, like runs into it head first. And then it kind of staggers away like it's got a concussion.
So it was Dante Robinson.
So it was Dante Robinson. Did it have dreads?
No.
Did it say "pay me" on its hoof?
And it didn't really say anything. It kind of gave itself a concussion like Dante Robinson used to.
Mm-hmm.
Did your car get tackled, or did it stay up?
Oh, no, it's still up.
Well, then it's Dante Robinson. Did the deer get fined for the hit?
No, but it couldn't hit another car the next day. It was dead on the side of the road.
Oh, we got him in. We got him in.
You
guys, whoever had the over for an hour and 59 minutes for Tom to make a Dante Robinson joke, you win.
There you go.
All right, everybody, we are a little tired and starting to get slap happy because we're laughing at Dante Robinson jokes.
I'm slap happy at all times then, because I always laugh at Dante Robinson jokes.
Enjoy another week, and hopefully we have another win to talk about next Tuesday.